Hello, and welcome to the Canadian Story, where we discuss what Canada is, what Canada could be, and what Canada should be. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Canadian Story. I'm really happy to welcome another one of my cousins. I think I might just have all my cousins on eventually, but this is one of my most accomplished, most famous, and probably kindest cousins. And probably the value that she values most in herself is the kindness, and I think we all value that in her too. But Aisha, you have always been someone that I've been incredibly proud to be related to and have bragged about probably too much. I know that Zach is really proud to be your brother, and I think for some of his life very much felt in your shadow, but that wasn't a bad thing because it inspired him to reach what the heights that he's reached, I think. You've always been an inspiration to me. For those who don't know, Aisha Gerber was one of the very best gymnasts in all of Canada and represented Canada at hundreds of international tournaments.
Oh, no, not hundreds. I didn't have that much time.
Right. Many international tournaments. And also got a full ride scholarship to UCLA because of her her talent in gymnastics, where she got a great education, did, as she does at everything, did phenomenally well, and has now moved back home to the place that she loves, Canada, where she is starting a family, and you're working for the City of Brantford right now, helping them plan a major event.
That I am. Thank you, David, for having me. It's an honor to be here, to be considered amongst your many wonderful friends and family members. I'm really excited. You are correct. I am working for the City of Brantford. We just this past week received notice that our request to postpone the event was approved. So we were supposed to be hosting this multi-sport event in February, this February 2021, but obviously under COVID restrictions, that's not a good idea. So we have thankfully received. Yeah, so I'm actually in a little bit of a different role. I took a hiatus from the coordinator position for that games, and I'm doing something else, but I'm hoping that in the next couple of months I'll be back to it.
So obviously sport, something that has played an incredibly important role in your life. You're continuing to be involved in the sports world. Canada, as I've always believed, kind of punches above their weight in sport. We have some phenomenal athletes. Sport is a sport, particularly hockey, but many sports is a big part of our culture. We're a country that loves activity and being active. We're far more active than Americans and many other countries. Tell us a bit about the role that sports has played in your life, and then connect it to the question we ask everyone, which is, what do you love most about this country? And you don't have to connect sport to it, but I'd just like to know about that first. You can love anything you want about the country.
Okay. So sport, as you mentioned, has played a huge role in my life. My parents put me into recreational gymnastics when I was 3 years old. At 5, I was invited into a pre-competitive program. At 9, I competed provincially for a year. And at 10, I started competing nationally. And then at 13, I started my international career and was named to the national team, which I competed for 5 years until I went to university. And then after university, competing there, I coached and ran a gymnastics club up until I had my daughter in 2019. So I've been at this since 1993. And now I continue.
She's been at this for longer than anyone has been at anything her age.
So that's just brushing over the main points. But I really can't speak enough about what sport has done for me. I mean, at the end of the day, particularly with something like gymnastics, that now at the age of 30, I mean, I'm still very good at watching it. I can do probably more than what most people can do. Like, I can still hold a handstand, I can still do a cartwheel. But really, it's not like hockey. It's not like running or soccer or baseball, something that you can just kind of pick up recreationally and continue to do. It's something that requires a really large amount of training, a ton of hours. And so with a sport like that, you have to shift your perspective and look at what it has given you outside of the sport. And things like discipline, hard work, pursuing excellence in everything that you do, and really going after mastering something, becoming a master at what you do. Those are lessons that I am fortunate enough to have learned before I hit 20. And I can't say the same for a lot of people. And that is something that I really value and take with me.
That's a massive blessing to have, basically being, if you can take the right lessons from it, right? I'm sure some people, when they go into I can't do this thing that is the only thing that I've done for so long, it would destroy them too. I would imagine there are probably people that go through that, but I definitely think you appear to have taken the right, these things. And I guess also it gave you an education, right? Without debt, I would assume, or at least very minor debt.
That one is huge too, to be able to graduate and enter your early 20s without any student loans is
that's remarkable. That's honestly,
it's a real leg up. It really is.
I spent a decade paying off my student loan.
Yeah, and I still had enough left over to buy a car. So
there you go. So so
a little bit of saving, a little bit of help along the way.
Yeah. Do you want to tell us any stories about maybe a particular experience in sport that was really profound to you?
Oh gosh, that is a tough one.
We can get back to that, but you probably
let's come back to that question, because I could think on that one for a while.
While we're on it, what do you love about this country?
Wow, and that one is a hard question to answer too. I did think about it. I mean, first and foremost, I think the diversity that we have is remarkable. And you introduced me as kind, so I'm going to say that I love that Canada is kind. Having had the opportunity to live in Los Angeles, people there are not as nice as people here. Right. You can't just strike up a conversation with somebody in the lineup at the coffee shop. That doesn't really fly. And you can hear there's the camaraderie here that is not present everywhere that you go. That's not to say it doesn't exist elsewhere, but it's something that we have that is unique, I feel.
I always have thought that being in a colder environment and having to experience some of our more terrible winters together may create a bond between us of suffering that other countries don't quite share. But then I look at Russia and they're not nearly as kind as us. So
everywhere that you go, there are just different cultures. And like you mentioned, I mean, I've had a lot of run-ins with Russians being in the gymnastics world, and their mindset is totally different. The way that they converse, like, they're much more brusque and abrupt, and they don't find the politically correct way to say things. and Canadians
right?
do, almost always.
I really like how you use the word kind instead of nice, because often the accusation we receive from people is that we're nice, and nice, while a pleasant word, is not a descriptor actually of an internal reality, whereas I think kind is an important word because it's a caring, it's a paying attention, it's observant.
It's more genuine too. It's a little bit deeper than just niceness. You can be nice to anybody, but kindness comes from empathy and understanding, I think.
Nice. That I want you to work on that a little bit more. Like fill that idea out for me.
Well, I mean, going back to what you were saying about Canadian winters being something that bond us, I think that on a broader scale, challenge has the ability to draw people together, right?
Well, and you would understand this better than almost anyone.
So is it the challenge of a particularly difficult training session? Is it the challenge of a season? Is it the challenge of, I mean, you can take it, is it the challenge of a marriage, raising a child? Like you can put it in any area of your life. I mean, right now, I was speaking with a colleague just the other day. I started working at this job about a year ago, and we can hardly believe that we've only been working together for a year, but we spent a year working on an event that probably wasn't going to happen during COVID. And the way that has brought us together as a team, if you choose to enter into it with that team mentality, is something that brings people together. And I don't know what the foundation of that is in Canadians. Maybe it's the fact that we all got on a ship and we came over here together and we decided that was what we were going to do. And that was our team. And that was how we were going to approach this new life. Maybe that's where it came from. I'm not certain.
Yeah,
but
I have a theory
there's
about
definitely that feeling that we're in this together and we're building something. Or at least I hope that we're continuing to build something. I think that we, could maybe use a little bit more direction in certain areas, but
no doubt. Well, that would be the purpose of this podcast, would be to try to find that. And I want to be clear on that. It's not to create it necessarily, although obviously I have theories on what it could be, but it's not about me. What is it about? It's about the Canadian story. And what is the Canadian story? What is it made up of? What's a story made up of, right?
Yeah.
And a story is made up of characters.
Mm-hmm.
Who are the characters of the Canadian story?
Yeah, it's the people, and it's all, the story is us interacting with one another.
Exactly.
And setting goals. And in a country as large and diverse as ours, there are going to be multiple goals, and not everybody is going to have the same expertise, the same interests. And that's the really wonderful thing, is that we get to create something that's really rich because of our diversity.
Yeah, and thank you, because I want you to go into that further. You said one of the things you love most about our country is the diversity. What is it about, like, diversity is a great, I agree. And I think when I think of diversity, I think of like the Amazon rainforest, right? It's like, it's an ecosystem living in harmony with itself.
Yeah.
But it's got a lot of different things to look at, different aspects to it, different like biology, different plant life. Like it's this rich environment, but the entire rainforest works in harmony with itself.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And the issue that I have with this idea that diversity itself is a strength is because diversity without harmony is an inevitable conflict.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
So you've worked with, high performance individuals on a team, but the sport is so individual.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're graded as an individual. Right. It's not like you're passing a puck to someone, right? It's more of a you guys are synergizing your individual talents to achieve a goal.
Yeah.
How do you see harmony playing out in that dynamic of being on a team that's so focused on the individual? Because obviously it works, and you've mastered whatever that trick is. So I think the listeners, and me even more, would be very interested in, what does that harmony look like, and how would you describe it?
Yeah, that's a really good parallel that you're drawing, and that it's a lesson that I didn't really have the opportunity to learn until I was in college at UCLA. Because up until that point, I mean, when you're when you're competing internationally, I found this about international gymnastics, it's far more individualized than it is team oriented. And when you get to a university setting, it flips entirely, because your whole entire season is based off the success of your team.
Right.
And then at the very end, the very last 2 days of competition at the national championships are for the individual. So you get the individual all around and you get individual event finals. But 2 competitions out of 20 in a season are based on the individual. The rest of the year is all about the team. And so I think there are a couple of aspects that kind of model that diversity in harmony. And what it comes down to at the very base level is that you as the individual are bringing your best forward to the team.
Oh,
right?
I love this. I want to work on this idea more. This is really good. Okay, you as an individual are bringing your best to the team. You're not coming to the team and saying, these are the things I don't like about you. Can you make them better? You're not there criticizing the team or critiquing the team. You're like, no. My job as an individual is to perfect my skill set.
Yeah.
Become
so
the
that
best
when
so that the team can benefit.
Yeah. So that when you go up as an individual on an event to do your routine, yes, it's just you, but your performance is affecting everybody else. And when you make a mistake, it costs the team. And then to flip that, when you make a mistake, it's the entire team's responsibility to absorb that mistake. Because it's not just you're a team.
This is a philosophy of life. This isn't just
yes. Let me get into the mental aspect of gymnastics.
Yes,
I will talk to you for hours.
No, let's go. Like, we'll have you on again. This is my podcast. I can do what I want.
Yeah. So I'm particularly passionate about the mental aspect of sport and the mental aspect of life, because again, it's something that I lacked through my club years. So when I was competing for Canada, and it wasn't something that I learned until university. And when I did, I went, if only I had known this, like right. How much better could I have been if I had learned these lessons a decade ago?
But
did I have the mental maturity at 10 to learn those things?
Yeah, that's what I'm going to say.
Not.
It's pretty hard as a 10-year-old to be like, yes, now I will understand the existential realities of life.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's the experience. It is, I mean, you train and you train and you train and it's not just what you do in the gym, it's what you do outside of it. So how hard you study for your exams, how much you are disciplined in your time management and in your nutrition and in your sleep, and, taking mental breaks, taking physical rest, right? Like you rest for the team, you eat for the team, you do all of these things that make you better as an individual. But ultimately what it comes down to is that when you go out to perform, you're at your best. One of, do you know who John Wooden is? Have you heard of him?
Unfortunately not. I would love to, though.
You should get into some of John Wooden. So he was a basketball coach at UCLA, a very famous one. He, among many others, he coached Kareem Abdul-Jabbar before he went to the NBA, and many others who I'm now forgetting. But he was a teacher more than anything else. And it went right down to, he was so detailed in what he taught. His first lesson on the first day of season was how to tie up their shoes. Because if you tie your shoes up correctly, you don't get blisters. And if you don't get blisters, you can continue to practice and you can continue to play without distraction. And, he was very big.
Details are important.
I mean, sweat the small stuff, right? And yeah, I mean, he was my coach's mentor. So I got I got major indoctrination of John Wooden. But thankfully so, like his philosophy is remarkable. But it came down to being your best when your best was needed. Right. And
this is profound stuff, Aisha. I hope you realize that.
I feel like I'm bouncing all over the place.
No, that's because I bounce all over the place.
Yeah. So, I mean, anything that you want me to elaborate on?
I want you to elaborate on this idea because I actually think it could become incredibly important to the philosophy of Canada.
Yeah.
There's a problem right now in an idea of entitlement.
Mm-hmm.
So the majority of Canadians, I would say, and it's sad, but instead of thinking about what they can do for Canada, they're more interested in what Canada can do for them.
Right.
And the problem with that philosophy is that they're part of Canada too. They're separating the idea of Canada from their own presence in it. So it would be like if on your team, there was one individual who was like, it doesn't really matter how I do.
Yeah.
The rest of the team will pick up the slack. The team would be furious.
Absolutely.
Right? They would be like, we don't want you on the team anymore.
Yeah.
Now, there are exceptions to this. Sport is not the same as society in which there are legitimately people who need our support and they can't give anything on like a fiscal or material basis. Right. They give us things on a spiritual and intellectual basis all the time where we can learn or, they make our lives better through the joy that they bring. People, I want to be clear that people's dignity is not connected to their economic output.
Absolutely.
It's just not, or it's not connected to their success. It's not connected to anything. Human dignity is inherent. And that's my belief. I think it's one of the foundational beliefs of Western civilization. If anyone disagrees with me that human dignity is inherent, then, well, they don't have to listen anymore because I'm going to keep saying that for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
But that doesn't change the fact that we're on a team.
Yeah.
And that when you're slacking on your part of keeping the team together, the rest of the team is picking up the slack.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And so really, your responsibility isn't to figure out how little you can do so the team can carry you. Your responsibility is to become the most excellent version of yourself with the most competence as possible, like you said, to be the best when your best is needed. Because here's the secret. Your best is always needed.
Absolutely. That's the thing. You need to show up every day, right? I'm going to lay out another John Wooden quote, and we had it hung up in our gym. There were two. One is make each day your masterpiece. And the second one was champions are made while no one is watching.
Oh, I've heard that one before, and I love it.
It gets you every time. It gets you. Right? Yeah. It's, and I think it really comes back to that idea of personal responsibility. And if you have personal responsibility, you can't have entitlement. And
you also can't be a victim. And it doesn't mean that you haven't been victimized. And this is such a key psychological fact that I've learned. And I hope everyone learns it because it's so freeing. It doesn't matter who's responsible for something.
Right.
That is irrelevant because you can't change that. This is a very stoicism concept, and I think it's just foundational truth, which is that you must separate all things in life into two baskets. Can I control it? Can I not control it? Mm-hmm. The things you cannot control, you eliminate from your emotions, your thoughts, everything. Yeah. The things you can control, you try to maximize the benefit that you can do to the team with those things. Yeah. And when you separate things into those categories, then you do one last thing. And then you say, and I will not allow myself to be emotionally impacted on your well-being standpoint by anything.
Right. Yeah. And that last piece is harder said than, or easier said than done.
One of the most impossible tasks you'll ever undergo.
It is. Yeah.
But just like I don't believe objective truth is accessible because we are we're finite beings. It doesn't mean we shouldn't try to access it, right?
Absolutely.
It doesn't mean that we shouldn't work to being always less wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think sport teaches people that in a very unique way, because failure in sport, while maybe publicly seems catastrophic, is how you learn. So I was hoping you could speak to, like, you've become the master of something. Like you already in your young life, you became one of the best in the entire world. Like, we're talking 0.000001 of people at something. What is that like? How do you do it? And what'd you learn from it?
Okay, what was it like? You don't even realize that it's happening. And I don't know if that was a product of age. I think that had something to do with it. Like I started when I was 3.
Right? It feels natural.
I just did it. It's what I always did. What do you mean another person can't do 15 chin-ups? Like, everybody can do that. What do you mean you can't climb a rope? Like, come on. I'm a little older and wiser now and realize that that's not, I mean, it's a very specific skill set. Having coached athletes, you can look at a person and go, you've got something, like your genetics have something that are going to make you good at this or not, right? And that doesn't make the people who don't have those genetics any less valuable as human beings. It's just you're not specifically given to this sport. Maybe you're really tall and you were actually meant to play volleyball.
There you go.
No?
But you should probably not be doing the bars.
Yes, it's going to, you know what? If you love gymnastics, I will be here for you and I will coach you every single day that you want to do it. But you might not get as far just because you're tall. And that's fine. Being tall is something to aspire to. I didn't get that.
Okay, so that's what it was like. How'd you do it?
So many hours. So by the time I was 10, I was training 30 hours a week. All through high school, I was doing 35 to 40 hours. On top of being a full-time student, when I was competing, I was traveling. There was one semester in grade 10 where I was absent more days of school than I was present. And I still had the highest marks in the class. Because I did my homework.
That's a very Aisha thing to do. Just excellent at everything.
Well, and that's the thing, is I had a lot of really amazing teachers too. Like, I can't not mention the support that I had from the staff at my high school. You know, I remember leaving on one of my trips, going in to see my history teacher and asking for, my homework. And he's like, don't worry about it. You'll catch up on whatever we've missed. I was headed to Brazil at that point. And he's like, it's far better that you at 15 are going to spend a week in Brazil and learning, like having that experience. Like, that's going to teach you way more than sitting in my history class. So like, you can catch up on Canadian history.
What humility of that man too. Like, that is an incredible understanding of what he's doing. It's not undermining it. It's just saying, look, I know what I'm doing. I'm not saying that I don't value what I'm doing, but what you're doing is different and actually probably better for you right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, lots of hours, repetition, right? Like, if you want to be a master.
Let's dig into that, right? Like, Warren Buffett says, so once Warren Buffett was asked by Peter Thiel, and Peter Thiel was interviewing him, he said, why doesn't everyone just follow your investment advice? It seems pretty simple. And Warren Buffett's response was, nobody wants to get rich slow.
Yeah.
And I think nobody wants to take the time, not nobody, but the level of dedication it takes to become truly exceptional at anything.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking the day in, day out.
Yeah.
For, like you said, what was it? 16 years or 15 years to get to where you were?
Yeah, about. I
Like,
mean,
how many hours have you put in? Probably over 10,000 hours during that time of
well,
just
easily, and more than 10,000 hours, talk 10,000 repetitions, right? So when we're talking about gymnastics, we're talking about specific skills, right? So you start learning a skill, let's say a back tuck, okay? So that's where you're standing on the floor, you jump up into the air, you lift your legs up and you go backwards over your head in the air, and then you land back on your feet. So feet to feet, no hands involved. Something like that, I started learning probably around the age of 6 or 7. And you start with jumping drills, rolling drills, like you learn what your body is going to do in the air before you ever attempt the skill. And then you do it with a spot, and you do it into a foam pit, and you do it off of a block, and you do it on mats. And then eventually one day you can do it on the floor without any assistance. And then you take it up onto the beam, right? And you do it on the beam, and you put blocks beside the beam so that it's like being on the floor, but you can still feel the beam under your feet. And then you lower the blocks, and then you put mats on, and then you take the mats off, and then you raise the beam up incrementally. And at every stage, you're doing, like, 10 was always the number every single day. Let's do 10 of this drill, 10 of this drill, 10 of this one. And then you have to do 10 back tucks, right? And it's not just 10 back tucks, it's 10 good ones. So you're also, when you start, you're probably failing at least 50% of the time.
Yes. Yes.
And they don't count, right?
Wait.
So you get up onto the beam and you have to do 10 back tucks, and it takes you 20 to 30 to actually get those 10. And then, I mean, I remember assignments where I had to stick 10 in, 15 attempts. And if I didn't make it in those 15 attempts, I had to start at 0.
Oh,
right.
Okay. So tell me what it feels like. So you're in this moment, you're drilling, and let's say you're tired, and you're failing, right? You're not maybe you're not doing your best, but
right.
What is your response to failure in that moment? Because normal people, they fail things that many times, and they will have crippling self-doubt for the rest of their lives,
right.
and never try anything again.
Yeah.
So you're engaging in daily failure, but you're not actually engaging in failure at all. You're learning.
No, you're failing forward, right?
Yes,
like you're repeating it to succeed. I mean, a lot of tears as a 10-year-old.
Yes.
A lot of tears. And that's the thing, is that I think in order to master something, you need a support team, right? You need people who are going to either be that kick in the butt that gets you back up and says you're not done until you succeed, until you've met your goal for the day, as well as the people that put an arm around your shoulder and say, you can still do this, right? And it's walking, whether that's one person for you or a team of people, you're always walking that line between extending yourself and pushing yourself beyond your limits, but not running yourself into a scenario where you feel so overwhelmed with failure that you stop trying.
Yes. I love that. Okay. So what does that balance look like? Like, in your mind, let's take it away from gymnastics. Let's make it a philosophic concept around failure and training and discipline and skill.
Right.
How do you find that balance? Because I mean, I'll take myself, for example. I've never actually been able to have the discipline at anything to accomplish that level of mastery. Could someone like me, let's take chess, for example, because chess is something I would genuinely like to be a master at. How would you counsel me to approach chess as someone who doesn't have your natural discipline from 3 years old kind of thing trained into me? How do I take that next step?
I would probably say get a coach. Get that external person who's going to call you up at the end of every week and say, did you practice? Did you read these books that I told you to read on, chess strategy? How many games did you play? Right?
Accountability,
I think is, even for me now in my life, like, I would not say that I have the level of discipline that I did when I was a gymnast. I also don't have the level of accountability, right? Certainly for the things that I'm trying to achieve. Like,
you are crushing this, Aisha. You are crushing this. Like, honestly, you were just throwing, like, the tidbits of knowledge that I'm getting from you right now are so good. But I think I just want to dig into what you just said. I also didn't have the same level of accountability. Essentially, you just gave us the blueprint for success. Discipline married to accountability.
Yeah. I think it's really hard to have discipline without accountability. Like, there are people who are far more masterful at discipline than I am. But for, your average person out there, you need accountability. You need somebody else, whether that's your spouse or a best friend or a sibling or, a life coach, whatever it might be, like whoever you choose to bring onto your team, you better be open and honest with them about what your goals are and have them hold you accountable, right?
Yeah, I got this little group of 12 friends that I've kind of put together over the years. It initially came together because of my campaign to dethrone Andrew Scheer, and has since advanced in its various iterations to where it is now. But one of the things that I appreciate about them most, now this isn't the same kind of accountability as a coach, but I think it applies still, is I'll generally run anything I'm about to do by this. I'll just throw it in the chat. They're all in the same chat.
Right.
And it immediately becomes a gut check, because all of these people are going to be utterly honest with me, but I also completely believe that they have my best interest at heart, because they have nothing to gain at all from their relationship with me besides love, right? And so my suggestion to people who are looking for accountability is the one thing I would say that I feel I'm somewhat masterful at, or at least I put a lot of time into and a lot of repetition, is friendship. It's been the chief project of my life, is to invest in my friends, to make new friends. I always love making new friends. I find that there's a purity to friendship that's almost impossible to find in any other relationship. Familial relationships are more difficult because you're stuck with them, and romantic relationships are just more difficult, right? But friendship there's a purity to it that's just beautiful. And true accountability, the best kind in my mind, is not accountability that's obligated, but that is chosen by you, right? So it's when I would like your thoughts on that, because a lot of your accountability in life, I know you have many great friends, and I'm sure you feel accountable to them too, but was structured. And a lot of people think that accountability has to be almost positional, right? Like an authority to a subordinate. So a lot of accountability would be in the job sphere, right? So you're accountable to your boss. Yeah. And a lot of people think accountability flows from up to down.
Right.
But the best kind, I would argue that the best kind of accountability is the stuff that flows down to up. Because honestly, a lot of the people on top are the ones that should be having accountability. And I think the major problem with society right now is that our leaders aren't taking accountability for their decisions.
Yeah. And I think true accountability, you're right. There's the kind of accountability that you have to your boss because you don't want to get fired. It's the fear versus respect, right? And fear will get you so far, but respect will get you a lot farther, right? Respect and love. So, true accountability amongst people who you respect and who respect you requires a measure of vulnerability that a lot of people are not willing to enter into, right? Like, you have to be honest and you have to be willing to be called on your decisions. I think it's interesting what you said about, I want to compare it to, so the year, my sophomore year at UCLA, we won the national championship as a team. Probably one of the biggest highlights of my athletic career. There was,
well, I mean, yeah, that's a pretty big deal.
It's huge, and it's not even about winning, it's the feeling of doing it with a team, right?
Oh, well, I can speak to that. That's politics in a nutshell. That
Yes.
It is that single feeling that you described that drives political. That feeling is an addiction, not a bad way.
There's nothing in the world
there's
that's
nothing
like that
in the
feeling.
world. Nothing.
And so to tell a little bit of that story, it was February. So the competitive season starts in January and it runs until about the middle of April. So about mid-February, we had a competition against Stanford, who were like a rival team of ours. You know, we want to beat the trees. I don't know why we ever lost to them, because, you know, we were the Bruins. So,
right.
But anyways, it was a particularly humiliating loss. And we called a team meeting. I can't remember if it was that night or if it was the next day, and we called it without the coaches. We sat down as a team, the athletes, us women together, and said, this does not fly. We are not doing this again. What are we going to do differently? And from that moment on, we didn't lose a single meet. We didn't lose one. We won the rest of the season. And I remember my coach, Miss Val, sitting at practice at the national championships, and she was just sitting. So she was just sitting at the judges' table. There weren't any judges there because it was the day before, and she was just leaning back. And I was like, she looked upset, is what she looked. And I was like, Miss Val, what's going on? Like, are you okay? She's like, I'm bored. I'm just really bored. Like, but because
you guys are teaching each other.
We had come together. We had decided what it was that we wanted, how we were going to do it. And from that moment forward, we, the athletes, the team, not to say that the coaches weren't part of the team, they were still vital to what we were doing, but we had taken an ownership for what we were doing, and we had accountability amongst ourselves. And later that same weekend, when I was going up to, I can't remember if it was warm up. My memories are vague now. But I was feeling a little nervous and a little jittery. And I had one of my teammates walk up, and she like smacked me really hard on the leg and was like, snap out of it. We don't have time for this. Like,
I don't have time for your insecurity. We got to win.
Go do what you're supposed to do.
I love it.
Right. So, and she didn't do it maliciously. She didn't do it because she wanted to win. She did it because she wanted me to be my best.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Right. And
you knew that, right? If she'd said that to you, snap out of it, and you thought that she was mean, or she was trying to humiliate you, or they were reading into that, then that would have probably not helped your performance. But you knew she was saying this to you because she's like, we're working on something together. I know you want it as much as I do.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Well, we had built the trust and respect from that foundation of like, we're taking this on ourselves. We're making this our own. So, you need accountability with your peers, not just your bosses.
And I want to take that to an interesting place and say that is how anything amazing happens in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Is a bunch of people coming together and saying, we're going to take ownership of this ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is the great tragedy right now of the Western world, is people have lost their ownership of the success of their nations.
Mm-hmm.
Right? we're in a place, like, let's take America for example, but Canada could be just as easily the example. America is just more present in people's minds. There is a strange national obsession with who's president right now. Because, like,
So weird.
I've worked in politics my whole life, and I tell you, I'm sorry to say it, but no politician is that important. and getting this emotional and this wrapped up in politics is unhealthy. It's just completely unhealthy. But the reason I think it's happening is because people are projecting their identities onto, and this happens all the time, and this is a very common psychological problem, is they're projecting onto their team. They're projecting their identities outside of themselves. They're making their locus of emotional control be attached to an event that they have no control of because it's addictive. This is why gambling is such a powerful addiction for people, is if you don't know the outcome and the outcome ends up being good, the dopamine rush is more than heroin.
Right.
So in this case, the people who thought Trump was going to win and everyone told them that he wasn't, and then he suddenly did, their level of happiness was so, because they projected their identity onto him, was so much heightened that when the second time came around, they had hot hand ballot fallacy, and they were like, we're going to win again. Now, I'm not going to talk to the veracity of the system or anything like that. All I'm talking about is, this goes back to what you were saying earlier, and this is why I think what you're saying is so powerful, is you were saying, we're talking about accountability, we're talking about discipline, we're talking about ownership, but fundamentally we're talking about being on a team. And I think that what Canadians need to do, and what I'm asking Canadians to do, nobody has to do anything, but if we want to keep this country going and make it, this is going to sound absurd, but I do believe we could become the greatest country in the world, and not just the nicest place to live, but the most influential.
Yeah, I think that
and that influence, and what I want that influence to be is harmony. I want us to be the shining light on the hill that shows the world that it doesn't matter what color your skin is, it doesn't matter what God you believe in, it doesn't matter who you want to sleep with, it doesn't matter. None of those things matter. What matters is, how do you treat other people?
Right. So then, can I ask you, because I think the other thing that a really high functioning team needs is someone to provide direction.
Yes.
Something to provide direction.
Yes.
Right? Like you need, at the end of the day, you need that person to be responsible, to unify, right?
And that's what a leader should be.
Yeah.
And it's not what leaders have been for quite some time in Canada, maybe ever. I'll let the historians argue over that. Yes, I think you are completely right, and I'm not going to reveal who or how, but I do believe that there is someone who could do this, and that there is a plan to make that happen. But it's not a plan for 1 year. It's not a plan for 5 years. It's not a plan for 10 years. This is not a you can't create a leader out of thin air. And I think this is what a lot of politicians fail to understand. And I'll take Derek Sloan as an example, who was recently kicked out of the Conservative Party of Canada caucus. Derek Sloan is a perfect example of why Canadians have bad politicians. Because we assume that someone with zero experience in a job that is not simple, being a politician is not an easy or simple job, can do the job just as well as anybody else. Because we have so denigrated and pushed down the role of politician, and Canadians love to mock our politicians. It's like one of our favorite pastimes, and not just mock, but like sneer at. Well, my dad said once, and I've never forgot this, he said, if you're continuously demonizing something, why would you be surprised when you get demons?
Yeah.
And I think that's a big problem. So a part of the problem is Canadians. They don't believe that politicians matter. They don't they don't believe that leadership matters. So that's part of the problem. But another problem, and this one I believe that we can fix as a society too, without our leaders, is we don't have a national story. We've lost it. If you ask most Canadians what, and this is the difference. This is why I no longer ask the question I used to ask, and I ask, what do you love about Canada? Because they all have an answer for that. Because what you're really asking is, what do you love about where you live? And everybody has a thing that they love about where they live.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if you ask them, what is Canada? Almost no one can answer.
Right.
They're like, oh, it's multiculturalism, and it's, we like hockey. And there's a lot of, very vague and uninspiring ideas that are kind of thrown around because we haven't even taken the time to build a national narrative. Right. And there's two reasons for this. The first is actually the very problem that if we solve will make us great, which is that we are a country founded on division, diversity. We're a country founded on compromise. And the problem with that thus far has been our way of compromising with each other is saying, how much can we take?
Yeah.
And I think that we need to shift that into how much can we give?
Right. Bring your best.
Exactly. I loved when you said that. It inspires me. It inspires me. that kind of stuff inspires me. And so I think the answer is, funnily enough, we need a story.
Yeah.
And we need a leader.
Yeah.
And I'm working on those two things.
Excellent. Perfect. Well, we solved the world's problems.
Well, we've at least diagnosed them. Now we have to solve them.
Now we need to make a game plan.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't think that has to be upsetting. I'm very excited about the idea of Canadians coming together and saying, no, let's become the greatest nation on earth. And when people say that's impossible, I say, there's a guy named Philip who took over a tiny little country north of Greece, and then he conquered all of Greece. And his son's name was Alexander the Great. So one guy with enough planning produced a situation in which his son could literally become a man who has great in his name. And that was just military conquest. So imagine if you could actually build something that was actively healing the deepest wounds of the world.
Yeah.
And the deepest wounds of the world is our tribalism. That is why the wars have happened. That is why, like, all of this is because there are people who benefit from dividing us, from saying one type of human is different than another. And I say, as humanity, we need to rise up and say, no, our value is not in our skin color. Our value is not in our sexuality. Our value is not in the religious creeds that we adhere to. Our value is being human. And that is inherent. Yeah.
And finding, I had a really inspiring conversation with a guy here in Brantford. He runs a business called Roll Basketball.
Let's bring him on.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to set that up. So he is a basketball coach, and he basically runs this business that is, drills and skills and conditioning training. But his real thing that he aims to achieve with every one of his athletes is helping them to discover what their role is, right? Like, what is the thing that you bring to the team? What are you good at, right? And again, it's like that best foot forward thing. Like, what are you offering, right? If you are,
what is the best you're going to bring? Just
because you aren't the superstar, and I'm quoting this directly from his website, so thank you, JR, but you don't need to be the superstar in order to be successful.
Oh, I love that.
That success is in doing your best at what you're good at, right?
And he's helping people understand what their best is.
Right. Yes. Absolutely.
I love that. That's a great life calling.
Yeah, it's awesome. He's super passionate. He's a great guy.
I want to, set it up. Let's bring him
I
on,
will.
right, Zach?
Yeah, I'll send him a message and let him know.
All right. Well, we've gone overtime, but I'm not sad about it at all. I'm very happy with I hope everyone listened to what Aisha had to say, because she's really, and I've tried to pull it out, so hopefully everyone gets it.
I feel like I didn't really talk much about sport. We got more mental and philosophical than that.
It's horrible. We're probably just gonna have to bring you back on.
My gosh, wouldn't that be terrible?
I'm excited to have you again. Well, thanks for joining us, Aisha. And thank you for representing our country so well internationally. I'm sure not enough Canadians thank you for that. And I just wanted you to know that I'm very proud of you and proud to call you my cousin.
Well, thank you, David. It was a pleasure to be here and to have this conversation with you, and an honor to represent our country. And I hope that I can continue to do so, perhaps not on the world stage anymore, but we can all represent Canada in our everyday lives.
Thank you for listening to The Canadian Story. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter at The CAD Story. That's The CAD Story. If you enjoy this podcast, please share it with your friends and family. Let's work together to remind Canadians how great their country is.